Southwest Regional Facilitator Workshop. My name is Tomas Delgado, Program Manager with the National Farm to School Network, and I'm coming to you from a very rainy day in Illinois. I'm so excited to spend the next few days with you, exploring the ins and outs of farm to school and getting to know all of you and all the important work that you do. We have a great set of material to share with you today, and this includes engaging activities to jump into and several guest speakers with us this week. On that note, I'd like to turn it over to Maya Timms, the Southwest USDA Regional Lead for the Food and Nutrition Services Office of the Community Food Systems of the USDA. So take it away, Maya.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maya Timms. I'm a program specialist with USDA School Branch, filling in as the regional lead here in the Southwest region, based out of Dallas. With that, we are a part of the Office of Community Food Systems, where we have embraced a community food system approach and working to expand farm-to-school principles throughout child nutrition programs. So this means that we are working so that local foods are offered in school settings throughout breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack. The high-level aim of this project is to strengthen the farm-to-school movement and increase opportunities for producers by boosting producers' capacity to sell to school markets through a train-the-trainer approach. This project capitalizes on the knowledge and strong partnerships of USDA Food and Nutrition Service, National Center for Appropriate Technology, and the National Farm to School Network. So throughout the week, I will be popping in and out of different breakout rooms in the different sessions. So thank you for taking the time to join us this week. We value your time in being a part of this training program, and we appreciate you bringing your expertise to support producers in strengthening their capacity to sell to schools. And I look forward to learning with you throughout the week. And I'll pass it over to Tammy.
Thanks, Maya. And welcome, everybody. My name is Tammy Howard, and I am with the National Center for Appropriate Technology. And I'm coming to you from very hot Belgrade, Montana. And you will get to know several other NCAT staff over the next few days. And I'm just going to tell you about a few of the folks that will be joining us over the next several days. So we have Devonna Bell from the Bringing the Farm to School. She's the Bringing the Farm to School program manager, and she's joining us from Virginia. And we also have agriculture specialist Robert Maggiani from Texas, Margot Hale from Arkansas, Mike Lewis and Andy Pressman from New Hampshire. We are also happy to have Carlos Vences, our tech support, joining us this week, and he's based out of Arkansas. A lot of these folks have helped with this project from the beginning, and we are so thankful and proud of their contributions. So the National Center for Appropriate Technology is a national not-for-profit organization whose mission is to help people build resilient communities through local and sustainable solutions that reduce poverty, strengthen self-reliance, and protect natural resources. Much of NCAT's work focuses on building sustainable farming and food systems throughout the U.S. NCAT is based in Montana with several regional offices throughout the country. So we'd like to start by recognizing the project partners on the call. In addition to our staff from the National Center for Appropriate Technology, you will see folks from the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, Office of Community Food Systems, like you just met Maya here, and several staff members from the National Farm to School Network, zooming in from across the country. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to Tomas to talk a bit about the National Farm to School Network and their role in this project. So Tomas, take it away.
Great. Yeah, and for those of you who just joined us, my name is Tomas Delgado, Program Manager with the National Farm to School Network. I'd like to recognize the team from NFSN for all their hard work to make this project come to life. With us today is our Program Associate, Jenny Lee Harris, and our Senior Program Manager, Lacey Stevens. And I just want to highlight the work that they've done around helping build the curriculum and so many more things that helped this workshop really come to life. And again, thank you to all of our partners at NCAT. So NFSN's the National Farm to School Network is an information advocacy and networking hub for communities working to bring local food sourcing, school gardens, and food agricultural education into schools and early care education settings. You'll have the opportunity to get to know many of these partners over the course of the next 3 days. And I'm super excited to just share with you all of the work that NFSN does, as well as our collaborative work with the USDA and the National Center for Appropriate Technology. So we'd also like to acknowledge the Project Advisory Council that met monthly during the curriculum development phase, offering thought partnership, feedback on curriculum, and just want to thank you for the continued effort and expertise throughout the workshop planning phase as well, in the grounding of the program, as well as development of best practices for working with and training producers. We'd like to just extend a thanks to all of their dedication and contributions to the project. And pass it back to Tammy.
Thanks, Tomas. We also want we want to see who all is attending today, and learn a little bit more about you folks. So as you can see, we're all of you folks, most of you folks are joining from the Food and Nutrition Service designated Southwest region. And we're going to tell you a little bit based on the information you all shared with us during the registration process. So you can see here a breakdown of the attendees by state. We have a whopping 11 from Arizona, so that's pretty awesome. 4 are joining us from Arkansas, 4 from Louisiana. We have 1 person from Oklahoma. 4 are joining us from Texas and 3 from Utah. We also have a couple of folks joining us from Tennessee and Kansas this week. And here's a breakdown of the participants by type of organization. 8 of our participants are from the University Extension Service, 15 from state agencies such as the Department of Agriculture and Education primarily. And then 6 of our participants today are from nonprofits, primarily including producer support organizations and other, and 1 person selected other from the Gila River Indian community. So we are excited to have all of you here today, and we want to thank you for your support and participation this week. And it's on to Tomas.
Great, thank you. So thanks again for everyone with us today. We'd like to just go over just some of our goals for the week, and just touch on what we'd really like to explore and what we would hope you all walk away with this week. So firstly, we'd like to just, an overall goal for the workshop is bringing together representatives from state agencies, extension offices, producer support organizations that are interested in training producers in selling to schools in their respective states, ultimately to form a state team. And the next goal we would love to meet is exploring bringing the farm to school training materials and providing an overview of the module content. Developing an action plan for each state training team to use as a blueprint for planning a local producer training is another goal. And in addition to that, just learning from producers, seasoned producers who have a long history of selling to schools in their areas. And then lastly, we'd like to just provide opportunities for state teams to work together in small breakout groups with the support of NCAT and NFSN. So you'll have some time to really start planning your local producer trainings, as well as just getting to know each other if you don't already know each other, and just learning more about the important work you all do in your state. Pass it back to Tammy.
Great, thanks, Tomas. So most of you have received an agenda in the packet that was FedEx to you last week, and hopefully you all received those. The agenda is designed to reflect the workshop goals that Tomas just talked about and to keep you engaged with plenty of opportunities to interact with the project content, with each other and with your state team members. So today we are spending time introducing the training program and the trainer's toolkit content. And in the second half of today's workshop, we'll have a panel featuring Kent Scope-Burley from Augustus Ranch and Margot Robertson from the Common Market. And Robert Maggiani is going to be facilitating that panel. On days 2 and 3, we'll be focusing on the producer training curriculum content. You'll gain a better understanding of the content you'll be delivering to producers, and there will be ongoing opportunities for you all to work together with your state teams. And then finally on day 4, we'll be taking a virtual site visit of Arizona Microgreens, and we'll have the opportunity to chat with Joseph Martinez, who is the co-owner of Arizona Microgreens. We'll also spend some time with the planning and outreach guide and go through the training evaluation process. Tomas?
Yeah, so adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic, we'd like to acknowledge that the COVID-19 pandemic in particular has brought a new level of complexity to farm to school, to providing any kind of trainings and to just working with producers everywhere. We have spent the last 6 months adapting content and training approaches to meet the needs of the current situation. We understand that this is not the ideal format to be conducting this type of training, but we've also seen incredible resilience and innovation during this time and know that this work must continue. We have built in a lot of opportunities to interact throughout the workshop, as well as daily 15-minute breaks with additional 5-minute breaks between transitions. Even so, we know virtual trainings can be challenging, so please feel free to step away and take care of yourself as needed. And lastly, one major adaptation, of course, is our virtual platform that we're using today. And on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Carlos Vinces to help us get to know our virtual training technology.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos Vinces. I'm with MCAT, and I'm based in Arkansas. Today, I'll be helping with the tech support for this workshop. So before we begin, let's go over and review a few Zoom features that I'm sure most of you have worked with before. First of all, let's rename ourselves. So you can do that by clicking the 3 dots on your individual Zoom box and selecting rename if you haven't done so already. So please add your name, organization, and your pronouns if you'd like. So we strongly encourage you to access the meeting via video versus just calling in, and to have your video on so we can see each other and increase interaction. So this is especially helpful in breakout conversations, but if you must, you can call in for some of the meeting. And on that note, if you're on video, but also using your phone for audio, we ask that you make sure that you enter your participant ID when joining on your phone. That way, your video syncs with your phone number, so you don't come up as 2 separate participants in the meeting. And you can find your participant ID number by clicking on the meeting info or the green checkmark icon on the top left of your Zoom screen. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. We'll be using a few different functions within Zoom during this meeting, so I want you to be familiar with them. We do have closed captioning as an option during this meeting, and on the bottom of your panel, you see the live transcript, and you can either show subtitles or hide the subtitles as desired. If you choose view full transcript, you'll be able to see the full transcript in real time to the right of your screen, like a chat box. And if you have trouble with any of this, please let us know in the chat. Views, you can change your screen view in the top right of your screen to see side by side with the shared screen in either a gallery or a speaker view. If you want to see more people, you can hover over the space between the slides and faces, and line will pop up that you can slide, see more folks, so you can use the arrows to move through the attendees. For chat function, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat with your name and organization. And feel free to use the chat for any questions you have that you don't want to hold for Q&A times. Or if you don't plan to verbalize a comment or question later, we will be responding to any questions we can that have short answers within the chat. Questions that are directed towards specific speakers or topics will be held into Q&A times, unless the speaker indicates that interruptions are okay. We also have the raising hand functions on the bottom panel. You can click reactions, and then you should see the raise hand option. So raise your hand to be called on for Q&A times. Please don't use this function during a presentation. We ask that you use the chat instead. We'd like to notify you that your participation considered consent to record main room sessions. So if this is a concern, please connect with myself or Lacey in the chat. During several points during the next 4 days, we'll be using breakout rooms, which you are pre-assigned by state, and you will need to click join room when it pops on your screen. You're always able to leave a breakout room and return to the main room. But unless you have an issue that needs addressing, we encourage you to stay in the breakout room until you see the pop-up asking that you return, or until your breakout group is done with their activity. The host can send chats to other rooms at once, but otherwise the chats become individual group chats, so you can use them within your group. We're also going to be doing several live polls during the meeting, so you should see a pop-up on your window where you can take the poll, and please engage in the polls. We won't close them until we have 100% participation. So if you have any questions or issues, just feel free to reach out to me via the chat function, or you can text me at my personal phone number. It's there, 512-214-0750. So this information is also in the participant and presenter home-based documents if you need it. And I'm looking forward to a great couple of days ago. I think that's all for the Zoom 101.
Thanks, Carlos. Hey, everybody, this is Lacey with National Farm to School Network, and I'm going to jump in and build on what Carlos just shared and share a few of the resources and tools that we'll be using together to really hopefully make this a fun and interactive experience and provide you guys with some tools to connect with one another and interact with all the materials in a more engaging way. So the first tool I want to make sure that you all are aware of is your participant home base. So Tammy just dropped that link in the chat box. If you haven't explored that participant home base, I'd recommend you pull it up, kind of have it in the background while you're attending. It's going to have all your go-to links, all the materials if you want to access those online, all of the links to our group Jamboards that we'll talk about in a minute, as well as all of the phone numbers and emails for all of your facilitators and coordinators. So if you need to get a hold of any of us, theirs is the best way to do it. And so we recommend you have this resource up at your fingertips throughout the next week, because it'll help make sure that you're able to access all of us and that you have the most updated agenda as well. So if we have any slight tweaks in our timing, because things happen, we have good conversations and sometimes the time adjusts a little bit. So we'll make sure that that's updated here in this virtual agenda. So keep your eyes on that throughout the week. And the other tool I wanted to share with you are the Jamboards that we'll be using. So I'm actually going to switch my screen share here and show you an example of a Jamboard and walk through some of the tools within that Jamboard so you feel comfortable with that. So each state breakout group is going to have their own Jamboard, and this is a place where you all are going to be responding to questions, documenting your conversations, making sure that you have all of this ideas and information that you've generated together this week in one place. So when you all leave and maybe start to have some follow-up conversations, you can go back and see, what did we talk about? What were the ideas and amazing brainstorming that we had together during this week? So the goal is for you all to be able to utilize and leverage this to capture and document your conversations and respond to these prompts in the breakout sessions. So this is what our Jamboard is going to look like. Each state will have one. And I just want to show you some of the functions. And when you get into your breakout groups, your facilitator can make sure that you all feel comfortable here, answer any questions you have, and make sure everybody's able to access and participate fully. So some of the main functions you're going to be using are to add a sticky note. So in one of our discussions, you might want to add some ideas to your Jamboard. So what you're going to do is come over here and click on this sticky note that's right in the middle there. You'll type in your message. You could change the color of your sticky note up here. So if each team member wanted to have a different color just to show different ideas, you can do that too. And then you're going to save, and it pops right up here on the screen. And you can continue to add sticky notes. If you don't have any more to add, you'll just press cancel. And then you can move your sticky notes. You all can work on grouping your ideas, helping kind of with your brainstorming and flow of the ideas through the session. So that's one of the functions that you'll use most often. I'll delete that. So Arkansas and Oklahoma have theirs ready to go. Another function you might use is to add a picture. So we'll be sharing and talking about farm to school in action photos. Some of you may already done this, but what you can do to add your photo, you'll come over here and click on your add image button. And then you've got the option to upload from your computer, drag and drop. You could do a Google image search or pull from your Google Drive to add a photo reflecting your farm to school in action. So that is our Jamboard. Again, your facilitator will be there to support any of the questions you might have and make sure that everybody can access and use all these Jamboards to the best of their ability. So that kind of wraps up our tech and introductory section. So if folks have questions, we will take a moment to pause, and while folks might be thinking about those questions, we're going to do our first poll and give it a test drive here. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a moment. We are going to launch our first poll, and it's going to tell us a little bit more about you all and your experience with producer trainings. So you should see a 2-question poll pop up in front of you. And we ask that you go ahead and respond to both of those questions. All right, we've got some responses coming in here. All right, great responses, guys. Give it just a couple more seconds. We've got about 82% of folks on the line voting. So let's see if we can get that up a little bit more, and then we'll share back and learn a little bit about one another. All right. I am going to share the results back. So our first question to you was, how many producer trainings have you conducted? So it looks like we've got a mix of producer training experience here, but for most folks, about 48%, or the most frequent answer was, our bringing farm to school would be my first. So great opportunity to learn from other folks who have producer training experience and build up your own. So we're glad to have this great mix of experiences and expertise here. The second question was, when would you anticipate your state to host a Bringing the Farm to School local producer training? So we've got some folks looking at coming up pretty quick here, more folks looking further down the line between 3 and 12 months away. And a lot of folks are here to explore and think about what it might look like in their state. Not sure yet how that's going to fit in their timeline. So all of that is welcome and wonderful. And we'll continue to talk about how this can fit into your work, when and where it can fit into your work throughout our time together. So I'm going to stop sharing the poll results, and I'm going to open it up and just leave a pause to see if there are any questions about tech. If anybody needs kind of support in any of those questions, you're welcome to direct message us, or if there are any questions anyone would like to raise right now about what we've shared so far. All right. Hearing none, I'm going to turn it back over to Tomas to keep us rolling.
Great, thank you, Lacey. So next up, we'd like to just touch on group agreements and expectations. For those of you who've just joined, my name is Tomas Tagato, Program Manager with the National Farm to School Network. And for this workshop, as well as the workshops your state teams will be planning, proposed agreements and expectations can be found within the Facilitator's Guide. Although community agreements should be, ideally co-constructed, we'd like to just go over a few that we have listed, and then hear from you if you have any that you'd like to uplift. So firstly, let's all just acknowledge the gender, race, class, neurodiversity, and heteronormative power dynamics in the room, as well as differences in farm size and experience level among producers. Secondly, another goal we like to touch on is one voice at a time. Thirdly, take space, make space. So if you're an extroverted person, make some space for others to speak up. And if you're a quieter person, we encourage you to just take some space and share yourself in the meeting today. Next goal we have and agreement we have is avoid industry language, followed by no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. And I really like this one because it's just an opportunity for us to tap into our collective knowledge and really take advantage of this great opportunity that we have being all together in the same virtual room right now. Next, we have stay mentally and physically present. And then lastly, please turn on your cameras if you're able to and come off mute and share your thoughts and responses whenever you feel comfortable doing that. So these agreements can be found in the participant home base that was shared by Tammy. But we'd like to just take a moment to see if there's any agreements that you'd like to uplift right now. You can add them in the chat box, or you can come off mute and share your thoughts. So we'll just take a couple minutes to open it up to you all.
Tomas,
Yeah.
we had somebody in the chat asked about, could you clarify exactly what avoiding industry language?
Yeah,
so a little bit more about that.
Sure, I would say not so much avoiding it, but don't share it without maybe explanation, with just acknowledgement that there are folks in this meeting across several sectors from several different areas that are coming to this meeting and shared space that may not have the same familiarity that folks at the USDA may have, or folks at the Department of Health may have. So I don't want to encourage you all to just not share industry language, but just allow some space to explain it or open it up, just so everyone can get educated and really get a sense of where you're coming from. Good question. And yeah, if there's any other agreements you'd like to uplift, you can go ahead and do that in the chat right now. Okay, well, seeing and hearing none, so we'll move on. And like I said, you can find these agreements in the participant home base that was shared earlier in the chat. And on that note, I'd like to just pass it back to Lacey to discuss about breakout sessions that we'll take advantage of this week.
Thanks, Tomas. Well, we are excited to get everybody into their breakout groups and start having some of this conversation and connectivity. So I'm going to share a little bit about kind of the tech side, what you can expect coming, and then talk a little bit about the overall purpose of these breakout sessions and what you can expect over the next week. So Carlos is working behind the scenes here to get us ready to go into our breakouts. And once we do that, you are going to see, he pushes the magic button, and you are going to see a pop-up box come up. And it says what breakout group you're going to. And all you have to do is push join, and you will be whisked away into the breakout room that you are assigned to. Hopefully it is the correct breakout room. If it's not, then you just click return to main room. Don't leave the meeting, but just leave the room, and you'll come back and we'll make sure you get in the right place. So it is that easy, hopefully, knock on wood. But so that's kind of the tech side. Hopefully it'll go that smoothly. We'll get everybody in their rooms once we kind of push that magic button to go. But just to give you a sense of what to expect when you get into those breakout rooms. So again, you'll go into breakout rooms based on your state. If you just have one person or maybe two people from your state, then you've been combined with another state, so you can still kind of share ideas and get some good dialogue and learning going even across state lines. But we know that state teams are going to be, we're saying teams are going to be in different places with this work. We know that some states have been already thinking about how are we going to put together a producer training and may have already kind of come together and have conversations, and they have a vision for what they're going to do together. Some folks may have not had those conversations yet. Some folks may not even know one another, and you're coming together for the first time or meeting new people from your state. And we want you to know that all of that is great and welcome. And wherever you are in this potential idea of where you want to bring producer training into your state, we welcome it and want these breakout groups to create an opportunity to support that and support thinking about how you can bring the bringing the farm to school into your state in all those many forms. So we'll talk more about all the ways that that can look later, but just want to preface that whether you've had these conversations and you know this group, or whether you're just getting to know one another, that is all okay. So we're going to have about 2 breakout groups a day. You are going to have different prompts that are all going to be on that Jamboard. And that's Jamboards, again, is a place for you to document that conversation. And your facilitator is going to help support those conversations for the first 3 days and help guide you through those questions. So our first conversation today is, again, a chance for folks to say hello, get to know one another. We're going to use Jamboards 1 through 3. The first Jamboard is sharing a Farm to School in Action picture, or perhaps if you don't have time to put a picture up and haven't done that yet, maybe just a memory or a highlight so folks can get to know you a little bit. And then we'll jump into those next 2 boards that have some prompt questions to help you start to think about, what does this look like in my state? And your facilitator will help you walk you through that. So I think if I have not missed any preface information, we are ready to launch into our breakout groups.
Great. Welcome back, folks. All right, so this next phase that we're going to get into today is just an overview of the Bringing the Farm to School Producer Training Program, and to just answer a few questions that you may already have, particularly, why are we doing this? Why are we all here today? And why Farm to School is so important in each and every one of your communities. So to start, the question of why the Bringing the Farm to School training program. Farm to School movement up to this point has been very strong on educating students and food service personnel on the triple bottom line. Because of this, there is a relatively high demand of local products on school menus. While there are some very strong farm to school programs that have great producer tools, there are still relatively few opportunities and resources for producers to be trained in accessing school markets. One of the goals of this project is to evaluate the amazing tools that many of you have created and create new ones as well as explore where gaps exist and to provide a comprehensive curriculum for state agency folks and farm to school leaders to use in helping build producer capacity to sell to schools. The program approach to this is, this is a train the trainer project. Both NCAT and NFSN have worked with the OCFS office of the USDA to develop a comprehensive curriculum for trainers to use in helping producers access school markets within their state. This is the 3rd of 7 regional workshops we are hosting throughout the US. And we hope each state team in the Southwest leaves with an action plan to use for planning and preparing a local producer training within their state. Now, the project phases of the regional facilitator workshop and local producer trainings, so they're in thirds. So we have currently 3 phases of the project. A needs assessment, which has been completed by Carolyn, one of our evaluators from New York University, and they'll be sharing the findings of the needs assessment next. And based off the findings of that needs assessment, our curriculum team developed the curriculum that you all received in the mail or are accessing online right now. If you would like to access the materials online, if you haven't done so already, you may do so by visiting the website, which should be shared in the chat. And just so you all know, it's www.farmtoschool.org/bringing-FTS. And we'll make sure that's shared in the chat for you. Great. Good. So we will be digging into the curriculum and training tools throughout the next few days. And since the national pilot we've hosted in September of 2020, we've been working to finalize the case studies, which you can access on the website here. We'll make sure you have that link as well. Good. There you go. There's a link to the case studies. So the project phase 4, after completing the workshop, training teams will hold a local producer training in their respective states. Our ultimate goal is that we will have the tools and resources and know-how after attending the regional facilitators workshop to build capacity for producers in your respective states. You may notice an overlap in the timings of regional facilitator workshops and the producers trainings as well. This is because some state training teams may want to conduct their producer trainings shortly after their workshop while it's sort of fresh on their minds and while there is enthusiasm and momentum to do so. We encourage each state and training team to consider the production season of your area and really when producers might best be available as attendees for a producer training. Planning a successful training will be discussed in more detail on day 4 of this workshop. So the local producer training implementation options, the producer curriculum is designed to be flexible, adaptive, and customizable to the training opportunities in your state. On screen are some of the options. You and your team could plan a standalone training. The producer training could be added to an existing producer focused event. You can even collaborate to incorporate curriculum content into similarly focused producer training events in your state as well. There's also flexibility in presenting virtually or in person, or offering some sort of a hybrid of a mixture of the two options as well. The format and agenda is also flexible depending on your time and capacities. You can find full sample agendas to help plan your training on page 112 of the Facilitator's Guide. And there you'll see that there's recommendations on the ideal format, being 2 days of training with experiential components, such as like farm tools, panels with producers, as well as panels with school nutrition staff. Alternatively, you can plan a single day event with a truncated contract if that works best for you. You can also create flexibility by maybe presenting the contents in smaller scales, maybe half-day sessions over the course of several weeks, if that works better for folks in your area. You can even conduct a targeted training with very specific content for specific producers, maybe ones that already have experience in farm to school and ones that are fairly new to farm to school. So the variations are pretty endless, and what we want you to walk away with is just the knowledge of how to implement these trainings based off of your area and what's best for your folks. So funding your training. There is additional information on funding your training in the Planning and Outreach Guide, which will also be covered on day 4. But we know it is important to talk about funding from the start. So this graphic here is available as a link in your Planning and Outreach Guide. And I know it might be a little small for you to see, but wanted to give you a visual reference to link, as well as the one that was shared in the chat as well. So this is a great resource, and it's broken down by program user and lists, mainly federal funding options for producer trainings. Those funding resources are also listed on page 8 and 9 of the Planning and Outreach Guide. And this is just a start to give you some ideas of how to find funding for bringing the farm to school producer training in your respective states. So think of this week as an opportunity to form partnerships that can help train producers, and consider those partnerships as you think about funding for farm to school producer training. So we are here to help. As your state training teams start to plan local producer trainings, it's important to note that you will not be working in a vacuum. You won't be alone. Our program team will be there to provide technical assistance and refer you to local resources for your within your given area, and really just to help your team come together and cover any gaps that you may have. We will also be hosting webinars and providing online tools for individuals or state teams that are not able to make this current workshop. So, this workshop will be recorded and it'll be accessible after, after this week is done. Great. So, yeah, covered a lot of information there. And of course, we'll be digging deeper into it as the days go on, but wanted to just pause and see if there's any questions or anything you'd like to uplift, or yeah, can we get a sense of how you all are feeling right now? All right, well, seeing and hearing none, so I'm going to move on. So next we're going to transition into a brief video where you're going to hear from our evaluation partner, Carolyn Dimitri from New York University, about the producer needs assessment that informed this training.
Hey folks, I'm gonna launch this video from Carolyn Dimitri, so bear with me while I do that.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Dimitri. Today I'm going to talk to you about the producer needs assessment findings that my colleague Lydia Oberholzer and I conducted when the National Farm to School Network and NCAT began developing their producer training curriculum. So the first part of the needs assessment was to understand the current state of knowledge. To do so, we took a multi-pronged approach. We started by identifying and examining existing data sets that had surveyed farmers and institutions about the possibilities of the farm to school market channel. We next examined the peer-reviewed and grade literature. We conducted a small number of interviews with key stakeholders in August and September of 2019, and we received feedback from the Project Advisory Council. So the first thing I would like to point out to you through these select stakeholder comments, that the response was very positive. There was an indication that farmers were extremely interested in selling their food to schools, but they really just didn't know how to do it, and they were looking for support in the process. And more specifically, they wanted to understand like the tangible aspects of it, like how do you actually do it? Where do you start? How do you find schools? And what kind of resources are available to help them in the process? So based upon the literature, we were able to identify the reasons farmers decided to participate in farm to school market channels. And interestingly, social factors were a really important motivation. Farmers saw that the farm to school market channels were a great way to build relationships with their community, a way to provide healthy food to children, and also to raise public awareness about food and agriculture. But the business aspects really mattered too, and that farm to school market channels were seen as a way to diversify their markets and their business portfolio, a way to get stable prices and fair prices, and also that the distribution costs of the farm to school channel were lower. But the obstacles to participating in farm to school markets were many. And related to the market, the first one was that some farmers perceived that prices were low. The volume requirements could be too large or too small, depending upon the scale a particular farmer was producing at. And then obtaining food safety or third-party certification was seen as a gigantic barrier. And I think especially when you think that a lot of the farmers are competing with Cisco or Sodexo, where they have these very streamlined processes, that you can see how this would be hard for farmers to imagine, like how they could actually compete against those giant entities. The other obstacles to participating in farm to school markets were related to the transaction. So how do you bid? Or how do you navigate that procurement process? Because schools often have a very bureaucratic system for procurement. And how do you find buyers and sellers? How do you maintain that buyer and seller relationship? And farmers didn't really know what schools wanted or needed, and they were unsure about how the payment situation worked. And so I think these two quotes really highlight two problems, like two of the most common problems. It's like, what does the school want? How often do they want it? And what, how consistent does the supply need to be? And then also, how do you take that first step and find a school that would like you could do business with, especially if you were operating in a school district that didn't have a farm to school coordinator. Logistics were perceived as another area that had several problems. And I think a lot of that circled around the fact that farms have raw product and schools can't cook. And so really what should farmers be bringing to the school? How does it get there? How is it packaged? And what are the storage possibilities? So we came away with some important recommendations for content of the curriculum, and that it should consist of information on pricing, procurement, vendor and marketing requirements, logistics and transportation. As these were identified as like the 4 key areas where farmers really needed more solid and streamlined information. And that it would be really useful to have a decision tree so that farmers could look at this tree and decide, is it better for them to sell to a school, or is it better to sell through an intermediary who then sells to the school? And that the community benefits were an important part of the process, and this should also be highlighted. And that also this curriculum should include case studies, webinars that could be helpful tools for farmers. So in terms of delivery, we, based upon what we saw and learned from our review, is that it's really important for farmers to have reasonable expectations about farm to school markets, and that a farmer should be interested, but not every farmer really will want to use a farm to school market. So if this particular product could make it possible for farmers to understand, like, yes, this is a good market for me, or no, this is not a good market for me, then I think we decided that would be a really important outcome. In addition, the possibilities and the working with schools really, that does vary around the country depending upon what region a farmer and a school would be located in. And it's important to identify these regional differences. And that the training team should consist of people with varied backgrounds. So they needed people who understood food service, other people who understood child nutrition, and then another part of the team needed to be someone who understands how to work with farmers. And that leveraging the mentor relationship could be really helpful by pairing experienced farm to school producers with new farm to school producers, so that the experienced ones could be mentors and role models. But it would be really important for the curriculum to meet the needs of these two groups individually. And experiential learning has been proven to be a really effective academic tool. And so incorporating experiential learning into this curriculum along with the classroom learning would really make this a richer experience for producers. And this could include farm trips or role playing, and there are many different ways the experiential learning could be implemented, and that the webinars and written materials should be available for use in the future. So in conclusion, our needs assessment found that there really is great enthusiasm for the curriculum, and that by providing producers with knowledge and skills, they can make a decision about whether they want to enter the farm to school market, and that this type of curriculum could really increase the likelihood of the farmer success for those who do choose to enter the farm to school market. Thank you very much for listening to this, and I hope you enjoy your training curriculum.
Well, we are sending our virtual thanks to Carolyn and her colleague Lydia from NYU, who have led our evaluation efforts, and thanks to them for this incredible report that, as you can see, really helps inform all that we're doing with this training. And I do want to share and reference you to another resource in your materials, in your green folder. If you're interested in digging into this a little bit further, there is a section in your project background document called the Needs Assessment Outcomes Report. In that report, you're going to see kind of the alignment of how all of these findings are introduced and integrated into the curriculum and those kind of specific ways that we address those questions and those priorities. So that's a great place if you have specific areas that you know are needed for training in your state or in your region. You can reference that resource and find out how we've addressed that specific concern and priority within the curriculum. And to that point, we wanted to check in with you all. You heard what this feedback told us about more generally, the big picture in our kind of national assessment and survey, what the needs for producers are, but we want to hear from you all what those priority needs you see in your state. So we're going to launch another poll on the top 3 producer training needs in your state. So I'm going to launch that. You should see it pop up. And these that we've listed here are the ones that you heard Carolyn talk about that were identified in that national assessment. If there is an option for other there, and so we encourage you to add that other to the chat box. If there's something that you don't see here that that is a priority in your state. So you can pick up to 3 to let us know what those top 3 priorities are in your state. We'll give a few more minutes to folks to respond. There we go. We've got almost half of folks responding, so keep those responses coming in. Again, if there's an other that you want to share that's not listed, please feel free to add that to the chat box. We've definitely got a few issues rising to the top here. Please keep entering your responses. We'll give it another 15 seconds or so. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share our results here. So you should be able to see the results here that the training needs that rose to the top from you all are around procurement process and regulations and vendor and marketing requirements. Those seem to be the top ones that we're seeing here. And we'll definitely see in the coming days how addressing those has been integrated through the curriculum. Those runners up look like logistics and transportation, a lot of opportunities to discuss that, relationship building as well, moving into one of the top areas too. So thanks everybody for sharing, and you'll see these themes integrated as we move into our next training days. I'm going to turn it over to Tomas to talk a little bit more about how we have integrated Carolyn's recommendations into our training approach. Tomas, I'll go ahead and share my screen here.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so once we had our needs assessment findings, we wanted to make sure that our training approach was one that could be best used to address the barriers and challenges named by producers in a format that would be appropriate for adult learners, as well as engaging engaging all in useful possibilities. So with this in mind, we landed on 5 elements to guide our approach, which are seen here. First, starting with Farm to School for All. The goal of this program is to build the capacity of all agriculture producers to launch or expand efforts to market to schools, which means making sure that the training approach and curriculum is stakeholder-led and informed by those who work closely with producers. The curriculum we developed is designed to be relevant and accessible to as many producers interested in selling to schools within their area as possible. The second element is a one size does not fit all place-based approach. Now, while the overall goal for farm to school is farm to school for all. We know that farm to school looks different region by region, sector, scale, and community, among other things. So the curriculum is rooted in a foundational set of core concepts of selling to schools, identified through the needs assessment as well as project partner expertise. And with that, the flexibility of customizing by region and locale is to ensure the program is grounded in places where the producer trainings will occur. We've identified opportunities throughout the curriculum to evaluate and elevate local and regional models and solutions through experiential learning, educational opportunities such as site visits and case studies, many of which are to be developed, and local producer spotlights, to name a few. The next approach is peer learning. Both the curriculum and the overall training program include opportunities for peer learning and peer-led experiences such as panels, facilitated groups, discussions, and seasoned producers, and built-in networking and collaboration opportunities. And then lastly, the last approach is action planning. The structural common thread that you will see throughout the curriculum is the concept of action planning. And the goal for local producer trainings is that producers will leave with an action plan, including outlined long-term goals, short-term strategies, and next steps for adapting their business plan and pursuing school buyers. Additionally, state-level trainers will be equipped with a trainer action plan, which is a tool used to help trainers plan and deliver trainings to producers. You will hear more about the action planning concept and how it will be used for both producers and trainers later today. And on that note, I'll pass it to Tammy to talk a bit more about the trainer toolkit.
Thanks, Tomas. So I hope the background information you all have received thus far has helped frame how and why we've developed these resources. We've referenced some of these resources today and will continue to do so throughout the training. So let's start to dig into these tools so you can familiarize yourself with the scope of materials available to help you conduct successful producer trainings. So we use the Trainer's Toolkit to reference all of the training tools and materials available to help state training teams work with producers in their states. Today, we're just giving you a high-level overview of the resources at your disposal as trainers. But keep in mind that we will be digging into these materials in way more detail over the next 3 days. So it's kind of easy to get overwhelmed to start out with as we start throwing these resources at you, but just know that in days 2 and 3, we're really going to dig into them. So the Trainer's Toolkit is divided into 4 buckets, which are outlined on your screen. And you should have received a hard copy of most of these materials in the mail, except for that last bucket, which is highlighted in blue. And that includes all of the online tools, including the entire toolkit, plus bonus materials such as those case studies that we've been referring to. The Facilitator Guide is the facilitator-facing resource, basically what you all will be referencing to help you conduct the local producer trainings. The Producer Workbook is to hand out to producers at your local, I'm just going over the buckets. So that slide with all the different buckets would be good. And yeah, there we go. So, and the Producer Workbook is to hand out to producers at your local producer workshop. And the planning and outreach tools are for trainer organizers. The case studies and the online materials help illustrate producers and buyers that are engaged in procuring local foods, with a focus on the needs of farmers, which were identified in the needs assessment that Carolyn was just talking about. So let's dig into those resources so you can become familiar with how to use them in your trainings. So hopefully everyone has received that packet via FedEx. And if you haven't, I think there might be a few outlying folks that will receive it today, maybe even while we're at this training. So on your screen is an image of the facilitator guide. And I'm not sure if I'm highlighted or not, but I have mine here, and you can see I've got some tabs in there already. And so what I'm going to ask you is if you could follow along with the hard copy of the facilitator guide, if you have one. And if not, Jenny Lee is going to paste the online link for you to follow along over the next several slides. So the facilitator guide will assist you as a trainer in facilitating your local producer training. And through the use of this curriculum, our team has developed for this project. So let's dig into some of those features. So I'm going to first talk about section 1, which are those facilitator resources. So think of the facilitator guide as everything you need as a facilitator to review before and reference during your local producer training. And the curriculum is organized into 4 training modules, which you see on this graphic on your screen, along with an introduction and conclusion. And you can see the topics of those modules in this graphic. And we'll be digging into the specifics of each of those modules over the next few days. And the first section provides background. That facilitator resource in section 1 provides background information about the project and tips for training producer audiences. And some of those training principles outlined by Tomas earlier are also outlined in this section. So definitely something you would probably want to review before your producer training. So let's go on to section 2, the module contents. So section 2 contains the curriculum and lesson plans for trainers. And if you just turn to page 9 here, you can see a list of the training modules. And if you're actually looking at this resource online, there are links to the slide decks and to the detailed curriculum outlines for each module. And Lacey's going to be talking about these detailed curriculum outlines tomorrow in more detail, and how you as a facilitator or trainer can use them before your training to just reference and understand the depth of each module. And each module includes the presentation slide decks and a detailed lesson plan, including with talking points, facilitator prompts, and activities that you can use to help producers learn the content. I want to note here that one of the reasons we developed that training team concept we keep referring to is that some folks on your team may be better suited to teach certain modules than others. So for example, extension associates might be best at teaching module 4, where we really dig into the price point and food safety concepts for producers. But then folks that are more experienced on procurement might be better at teaching modules 1 through 2. So your team will have the opportunity to identify where your best fit is, and also gaps that you might have in partnerships over the next few days. This section also includes specific guidance for each module, including a facilitator training. So let's look at an example. If you turn to page 25, and I'm also doing that along with you here, of your facilitator guide, you can see in module 1 the outline, which includes those producer learning objectives. So you can kind of look at this to check for understanding that you're going to want the producers to have. And then also the list of core concepts, just so you can become familiar, that are specific to this module. And then below the outline, you can see a list of resources to help you learn about the content within each module. So if you turn to page 26, this also includes a list of some of the case studies that are really relevant to this particular module, and some key terms that are important for you to understand and for your producers that you're working with to understand. So let's turn to page 29 now. And I think this is a really good example of the components featured in the lesson plans to support you for each slide in each module of the training. So as you can see here on the top left, there's a thumbnail of the slide from the corresponding slide deck. And then each slide includes some suggested talking points. These are intended to support diverse teaching approaches and to help you minimize reading from the slides. So you can, these talking points are also pasted in the notes section of those slide decks. But you don't need to read verbatim from these talking points, and they're simply meant to provide some kind of guidance for you. So you are welcome to change those talking points in your slide decks if you'd like. And so the other thing I wanted to point out here is the facilitator prompt. So on page 29, it's in a sort of shaded blue color. And those emphasize particularly important information and instruction techniques to keep the content actionable for the producers that you're working with. And then we also have, going on to slide 10 on page 29, you can see that regionalization tip. And that indicates some content areas that should be or could be presented with local and or regional examples and information. So we strongly encourage you to, customize the training as much as you can for your specific audience or your specific region. And we will be providing you with guidance on how you can do that over the next few days. So as you can tell, we're going to be covering a lot over the next few days because I keep saying that. So let's turn to page 33 now, because there's one other thing I want to point out with a feature of the facilitator guide in the lesson plans. So there are a lot of applied activities through this curriculum, and you can see an example of the facilitator guidance for applied activities on page 33. And the activities are flagged in yellow in the guide as well as in the corresponding slide deck. And we try to include instructions and any kind of necessary materials or tools you might need, as well as some suggested reflection questions to help connect the content to the producer workbook. And in many cases, the activities are actually based on worksheets from the producer workbook, and we'll be reviewing that next. And this particular slide 17 applied activity does not relate to something in the workbook, but just it is a good example of some of the many applied activities that we're asking you to do with producers. So the last thing I want to share with you about the facilitator guide is the appendices, and they're right after the glossary on page 108. So let's just turn to that. And I should mention the glossary of terms, which is very extensive, starts on page 105, goes all the way to through 107, including some commonly used acronyms that we've all had to learn in the farm to school realm. So all of these things are helpful to know yourself and to share with producers. And so the appendices start on page 108, and you can see the facilitator tools and resources are actually broken down by each module. And if you feel like you need more resources to do that particular section of the training, then you can look at these resources within your hard copy, or might be even better to actually access those resources online. So if you turn to page 111, I also wanted to show you that there's lots of resources as a facilitator for like planning a panel, building your training team, as well as some sample agendas. And Appendix B includes a list of producer-specific resources that are referenced throughout the curriculum. And that starts on page 115 if you want to look at that. But those are just the resources that you're going to be sharing with the producers throughout the curriculum. And there's more detailed resources for producers included in the producer workbook. And then you'll find lesson plans for some optional modules that weren't directly related to our content or were for specific audiences. And those are included in Appendix C. And finally, the evaluation guidance that our partner Lydia with the evaluations team will be explaining on Thursday, and that's in Appendix D as well as in your pocket folder. So finally, the last thing I wanted to point out here is that there is a copy of the trainer action plan in your facilitator guide on page 139. That is also included in your pocket folder. But if you want to work off the action plan in your facilitator guide over the course of the next few days, and so you have everything in one place, you feel free to work on that there. So that about wraps it up for our overview of the facilitator guide. And we're going to turn to the producer workbook. So take a few minutes to grab that resource and so you can follow along. But while we wait for folks to grab that, are there any questions that I can answer specifically about the facilitator guide? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in the chat. Yeah, Kelly just asked if printed copies are available for order. We do have several printed copies in the kind of fancy spiral bound that we've ordered, and of both the producer workbook and the facilitator guide. They're mainly meant for facilitators at this point. And we haven't really discussed as a team whether or not we can order those in bulk and maybe have it provide those for you at cost, but we can discuss that as a team later. All right, without any other questions, I'm going to turn to the producer workbook here. So basically, the producer workbook is that producer-facing resource that you're going to give to producers at your local producer trainings. And this is what has the green color bar at the top, as you can see on your screen, and I've got mine here. And we really want the producer workbook to truly be more of a workbook so that there isn't as much text in this as you'll see in the facilitator guide. But there are quite a few activities and worksheets. But we did organize a workbook so that it corresponds with each module. So each module also includes an abbreviated outline. We wanted producers to have a quick glance guide at what topics are included in that section. So you just turn the page, and at page 2, you can see an example of that in the introduction. And producers will also be able to see a list of resources to help them understand the concepts in that particular module. So if you turn to page 10 of the producer workbook, you can see an example of one of those producer worksheets that I referenced. Each module has one or more worksheets, many of which correspond with these applied activities that are outlined in those lesson plans and that are in that yellow in your lesson plans and in the slide decks. So it's important for you as facilitators to become familiar with the worksheets so that you can help producers if they have questions about the worksheets or activities during the training. So let's turn to page 21 of your workbook. And you can see an example of an abbreviated version of one of the many case studies for this project. And more on the case studies in a minute, because we're going to access those online. So we've included these case studies in the workbook to help provide producers with some kind of context and a practical application of the concepts for that particular module. So let's go to page 52. And I wanted to point out that there's, again, in this particular, in the producer workbook, we also have several appendices. And they include some really key resources that producers will be using throughout their training. And of course, we'll be digging into how these resources will be utilized in the producer trainings over the next few days. And one of the key resources in the appendices is a school business action planning guide. And Jenny Lee is really going to be digging into this later on. So even though this key resource is actually in the producer workbook, it might be a good thing to actually consider printing for your training so that producers actually don't have to toggle back and forth between the action plan and the producer workbook as you're conducting your training. And the school business action plan, just as a sort of quick overview, will really help producers organize their goals. We try to organize the producer workbook as kind of like a goals-based program in accessing school markets. So the culmination of that is this action planning guide where producers can organize their goals and next steps as they move forward to accessing school sales. And our team has developed a supplemental online training for you all to help producers work through this school business action plan on the Bringing the Farm to School site. And I'll show you where that is in just a second here. And as I mentioned, the case studies in the workbook are in an abbreviated form. And we wanted to elevate producers and other supply chain leaders engaged in school sales through these case studies. And they're in multiple formats and feature producers that have addressed the challenges that Caroline just identified in that needs assessment. They're written in the form of 2 to 3 page documents, as well as we have podcasts and videos. And as I mentioned, other than the abbreviated form in the producer workbook, the case studies live online. So we want to make sure to point these out to you so you can point them out to producers because they are really useful resources and are kind of debunking some of those myths that are associated with farm to school and producers accessing school sales. So now I'm going to turn to the planning and outreach guide, and that was also in your packet, but it was not spiral bound. And this is everything that you as a trainer or as a trainer organizer will need to plan, execute, and do outreach for local producer trainings. And many of the tools in this guide are online and probably are better if you're better accessed in the online version. But like I said, there is a copy for you to review, a hard copy for you to review in the packet. So let's turn to the table of contents. That's just on that very first page there. It's page 2. And as you can see in the table of contents, there's lots of great resources for you to use as a trainer organizer. So there's budget templates and lots of templates to help with the outreach piece of organizing your training. So let's also turn to page 16 through 18. And you can get an idea of some of the amazing formatted materials that Anna Mullen from National Farm to School Network and NCATS graphic designer Amy Smith worked on together to develop for trainers to use for outreach. And these materials are available online to use and adapt for your particular local producer trainings. And because of the, like I said, is because of the adaptability of this particular resource, I think it's probably better accessed online. And so that's a perfect segue to look at the online interface and online version of the tools I've just described. So I am going to start sharing my screen here, and we will show you the online interface. All right, hopefully you all can see this. So you've seen the hard copy version of these resources, and now I wanted to show you how we've tried to develop the online version to be really interactive and customizable for you to work on. So Jenny Lee has also pasted the web page onto, or the link onto your chat, but you can also access it at farmtoschool.org, bringing F to the number S. So as you can see, it starts out with just a basic overview of the training program for agricultural producers that we've developed, and kind of mentions a lot of our amazing partners that have worked on the training program. The next section is the regional, basically what's happening now. And what's happening now with this project is that regional facilitator workshop that you all are attending. And we have, as Tomas had mentioned, this is the third. We're on the third regional facilitator workshop, and we have 4 more to go. And we will be replacing this happening now section, though, as you folks start developing your local producer training. So it will look a little different, and we will make sure that we are elevating the local producer training dates that you all are organizing here in the Happening Now section. And so the real meat here is for you folks as facilitators, is that these training materials. And so as you can see, it's broken down by facilitators, producers, resources for producers, and then the case studies that are relevant to both of you. So let's go on over to the facilitator resources that can be accessed with this hot link here. And I actually have, this already brought up here. So, so you can see the Bringing the Farm to School Facilitator resources. And right here, you see the facilitator guide, the online version, and also lots of the slide decks for each of the modules are downloadable here. And once you download them, they can be adapted for you folks to work on your local producer trainings and adapt. And another thing I wanted to show you really quick are some of those additional resources. So that building your training team that we've referred to already in our outreach information for you folks is here. It's a recorded training. And then we've developed a how to use the action planning guide for producers recorded training here. So you can access those after you've gone through this training. So I'm going to download the facilitator guide really quick here. And I just want to show you a few things and mention that when you click on the link from the website, it is in a booklet form, like the way you see it in a hard copy. And it might be better to just download it and have it in a single page format. But let's just go to the module introduction, and you can see a lot of these digging deeper into the core concepts are embedded as links here. And so I wanted to make sure that you folks can see that. Also, you can download the slide deck for that particular module here. And then the case study link is also here. So I wanted to make sure you all got to see that. And then I want to, let's go, you can always go back to the main page by just clicking on this link here, and that'll bring you back to that main page. So let's go to those resources for producers. And this, again, you can access the producer workbook. And another thing that will be handy for you as facilitators as well is that School Business Action Planning Guide is embedded as a link here, as well as the producer worksheets. I'm just going to bring that up right here because they're in a PDF form, but they're also available as they're fillable PDFs. So if folks want to just kind of work on them online, and you want producers to work on them online while in the training, this is it's kind of fun to be able to have the fillable PDFs. So that's a really nice resource there. One thing I want to point out with the producer workbook, again, there are a lot of embedded links in here. To the optional content, slide decks, if the producers want to go back to that. The case studies are in that in that outline that I mentioned earlier. But I also wanted to share with you something that is unique to the producer workbook. Here's that worksheet. But we also have a digging deeper section. And I'm scrolling down here because there we go. So this digging deeper section for producers has videos. It also includes our case studies, but also resources for producers that want to dig a little deeper into the content of that particular module. So that is actually located at the end of this, of each module in the producer workbook. And then finally, I'm going to show you folks the case studies and how those look and live online. And as you can see, the case studies are, they're by producer type here, or interview type. There's some folks that we've interviewed that are actually based on the procurement side. And as you can see, they also have several different formats. So for example, in the Anthony Youth Farm that you're seeing here, we have a couple of written case studies as well as a podcast. And if I scroll down a little bit further, our friends in Oregon helped with a video case study of Camas Country Mill and Umi Organics. And so that is actually in a video format. And a lot of the video and podcast excerpts, we have short excerpts in there that are actually used for that are used within the slide decks. They're embedded in the slide decks for you to use, or you can use your own case studies, but it just kind of gives you an example of how you can do that within the slide decks to make it a little bit more interactive and keep the producer context very, very real for your producers. And one last thing I want to show you, I'm going to head back to the Bringing the Farm to School webpage, and we're going to go to the facilitator resources. And there's that planning and outreach guide that I said was really great viewed online. So a lot of those templates are just listed out right here for the workshop budget, the social medias and graphic samples and all of that kind of stuff are there. But I will also show you the online version of this toolkit. So the purple phrases are, as mentioned here, are actually templates, and the blue hyperlinks are editable versions of the templates. So that kind of gives you an idea when you see them within the online version of the guide. And so let's, as with all of our table of contents, we have embedded links. So let's just go on over to the sample postcard that you all can use. And this shows you just a sample of, oh, I went to a poster, but that's okay. So this just gives you a sample of what a poster would look like for local producer training. But what I wanted to point out is that you can also access the PowerPoint version of that template right here and edit and change it for your own producer training. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen because I just provided you with loads and loads of information and resources. And I want to open it up for questions for you folks. Feel free to take yourself off mute. That's what I'd prefer because I'd love to hear all of your voices, but also put questions in the chat if you feel more comfortable. So I either fire hosed you and you're all overwhelmed by the content of the information, or we did a good job. So I'll just pause for another minute just in case anybody has questions or comments or anything they'd like to share. Thanks, Raven. We've done our best, but again, you all will be making them adaptable to your own regions. So that's what we really hope. All right. Well, Tomas is going to do a quick check-in for you folks and take it away, Tomas.
Great. Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, so we have shared a lot of information, as Tammy just shared. And it's kind of a midpoint in the day where we just want to check in with you all. But before we do that, just wanted to know if you'd indulge me in just a quick little activity in which I'd ask two things of you. First, think of one word that best describes the workshop so far. And then secondly, share that word in the chat or come off mute and share it verbally. All words we love to see: phenomenal, structured, comprehensive, organized, thorough. Excellent, detailed, inclusive. Thank you. Well, thank you for that immediate feedback, and we'll give you all several other opportunities to share your thoughts on the training as we progress into the week. And I know that we just had a quick sort of check-in with you all, and we opened up the floor based off of the segment that Tammy just covered, but wanted to give you all another opportunity to share any kind of thoughts that you have on the curriculum that's been shared so far today, any of the training materials that you have in hand or that you're accessing online right now, if you have any questions on that, or really just any kind of comments or feelings that you're wanting to share with us right now. So just give a couple moments to touch on that and give you all the opportunity to chime in. Okay, so one question, will there be folks available to come to a training when we have one? So our approach to technical assistance is not so much to actually attend any of the producer trainings that you'll all be conducting. We'll be certainly providing a lot of support in reviewing your agenda or providing any kind of networking options that we can within your state and within your area, but that's not actually going to be one of the components of technical assistance. So you may not be seeing us, but we'll certainly make sure other people who should be there based off of your state will be there with you. Mhm.
Have there been any trainings implemented so far using these resources? I'm a little bit curious about how that went, or if there was like any sort of pilot, just because of how detailed and well thought out they seem to be at first glance.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the question. At this point, there hasn't been any producer trainings that have been fully planned or executed yet. Of the 2 trainings that we've conducted so far, we've definitely been in conversations with a few of the state teams within those regions around really just getting everyone at the table again, and continuing conversations, which will then be sort of used to plan and implement those trainings within their state. So, it's been a mix of states who were already very well prepared going into the training, and had already done a lot of networking, and a lot of that groundwork's already been sort of laid out. So they're in a better place of really introducing that training, maybe sometime this year, whereas other states are planning for next year sometime. So it's a mix, and it's a varied mix right now, but at this point there hasn't been any producer training so far, but this is only our 3rd. As the year progresses, we'll likely see some more interest and planning drum up within the regions that we've covered, and we'll be sure, as a part of technical assistance, to kind of share some of the success stories and outcomes of these local producer trainings with everyone who attends.
Excellent. I'm excited to get feedback as everything starts to roll out.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Alrighty, well, not seeing or hearing any more questions, comments. And as I said, we'll give you all plenty of opportunities to kind of share thoughts. And looks like there's maybe one more. Are state agriculture departments participating, or is it mostly Department of Ed? So within this workshop, as well as previous workshops, it's been a mix of Department of Agriculture, Department of Ed. There's certainly a Department of Agriculture presence here on a national, federal level. And then we consult each regional state lead and best doing outreach for their region to get folks at the table here. But I wouldn't say it's, there's not a favoritism of any particular department, and we're really just wanting a really nice, diverse cross-section of state agencies at the table here. So, and obviously that depends on their own capacities to attend and interest levels as well. So, All right, then. Well, thank you for that question. Up next, we're just going to take a longer extended break, give you all an opportunity to reset. And I think time-wise, let's agree to be back at 2:05 p.m. Mountain Time. So just a good 15 minutes to reset, and we'll jump into the panel that we have in store for you all today. All right, see you then.
All right, I guess we're going to go ahead and start. I'm Robert from the Texas office. Glad to be able to be part of this panel that we're fixing to do here in a minute. It's going to consist of some really wonderful folks from here in Texas. I'm going to show you an example of what we have in mind when we talk about doing a panel for when you do the trainings in the states that y'all are representing. We're hoping that this panel will show you kind of how 3 or 4 reasons why we want to try to do these panels. Number one, that gives you an opportunity to really put some local context, some local folks into presenting examples that the people in your training can really relate to. It'll enable you to address some marketing questions that I'm sure all the producers will have on their minds as they attend these trainings. And just as important, it'll help you hopefully really break some myths and break some misconceptions around what is farm to school and what isn't, what farm to school isn't. So those are really the 3 reasons why we are strongly encouraging each of y'all to do a panel or some sort of facilitated group discussion in each of the trainings that you're going to be doing in your states. I'm going to ask our 2 panelists to introduce themselves in a minute, but we are going to have, representing the producer, we're going to have Kent Scoberly from Augustus Ranch in the great metropolis of Yoakum, Texas. And we're going to have Margot Robertson representing the Carmen Market, Texas from, we'll just say the lesser area of Houston, Texas. I will ask y'all, Kent, if I might ask you as to include as part of your introduction to yourself and description of yourself, to talk about your farm, its location, how many acres, kind of the scale, what you do, what other products you sell, what other sectors you sell into. Just kind of a nickel tour for everybody of what the Augustus Ranch does. I know this is not really enough time for you to tell the whole story, but a little bit of the story. And then Margaret, I'll ask you to do the same thing. Get kind of the nickel tour, what Common Market Texas is, how long it's been around, kind of where Common Market Texas fits in the whole scheme of the Common Market. And then how we're going to talk later then about how and why y'all get into farm to school. So Kent, if I might ask you to kick it off, please.
Sure, thank you for that introduction. Nobody here has likely heard of Yoakum, Texas. I usually say Shiner, Texas, which is about 10 minutes down the road in the other direction, because it's the little town where they produce Shiner Bock, which is a pretty recognized beer. But yeah, we're Augustus Ranch. We're located pretty much right in the center triangle between Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. So if you look at the map, you draw lines between those enormous cities, San Antonio and Houston more so, Austin definitely on the rise very rapidly. We're kind of right in the middle there, so we're really well situated to be able to service those 3 areas. And at Augustus Ranch, we manage about 5,000 acres. There's 6 or 7 properties in the immediate area that we own and manage. The biggest property is 2,500 acres. The smallest property is 500 acres, somewhere thereabouts. And we raise everything from start to finish on the ranch. So that includes cattle, pigs, goats, and also chickens. Chickens are very seasonal. We do it in small batches in the spring and the fall. We don't even really wholesale those. Goats are land management tools for now. We don't have a meat program, but they're phenomenal at clearing brushy areas and really just being used as a land management tool. Cattle is really our primary product, and we raise everything, like I mentioned, from start to finish on the ranch. It's all pasture based, meaning our animals never see a feedlot or a confinement setting at any point in the process. We have an all natural protocol, so there's no antibiotics or hormones ever given to the animal. In the rare case that an animal is sick and it needs antibiotics to live, because that can happen, we'll treat our animal based on the vet's recommendation, but we actually don't include that animal in our red meat program as of right now. but it's very rare because we go to great lengths to really just try to cultivate an environment that's very natural and low stress for the animals. And we also do a lot of work in terms of our genetics of our herd to adapt them to our specific environment of where we're at in Texas. So yeah, we're small, we're relatively small. I guess it's all relative. We've done anything from 6 to 8 cattle per month being processed up to 35 to 40 cattle per month being processed at the height of our awesome contract and experience that we had working with the Common Market and the Austin Independent School District kind of pre-COVID. It was kind of a 6-month period that we worked together to supply the Austin Independent School District with about 75,000 pounds of ground beef for the 6 months leading up right to the point that COVID happened. And that has pretty much halted further progress, but we're hopeful that perhaps next year, fall of 2022, or before or after, at some point that we'll be able to work together again in some capacity. So you can check us out at augustusranch.com, and we ship packages to folks all over the nation, direct to consumer, in recyclable shipping materials with dry ice. So we do both wholesale and retail. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can email us or get in touch with me anytime. So hopefully that's a good overview. I put together just a few slides to give just a kind of a producer's perspective, if you will. I'm happy to jump into that right now, or did we want to switch gears and go somewhere else and come back to this, or do you want me to just keep rolling?
No, just keep rolling, Ken. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I apologize if I cover something you guys are already well aware of, or if you've covered it in this training. I haven't been here until just 15 minutes ago. But just to give you a snapshot of how it all works, from genetics to dinner on your plate is how I like to say. There's 7 stages, and this is applicable at whether it's the industrial food system or whether it's the small mom and pop ranch. And so there's basically these 7 different stages that we go through to produce red meat. So I said 24 to 30 months from start to finish. That is our ideal time frame. In an industrial setting, they can speed that up quite a bit. They can produce a fully mature animal that's ready to harvest in less time, maybe 16 to 18 months. They can do that through just the feedlot kind of industrial system, very controlled diet, hormone implants, subtherapeutic antibiotics to kind of offset some of the stress and other things that happen in the industrial setting. But for us, 24 to 30 months of age is a natural rhythm. It's a natural amount of time for the animal to live a full life and come to maturity in a really kind of organic way. It all starts with the genetics, and that's really the bulls and the cows. And so we're really specific about that. I mentioned that we have specific genetics that we have been working on for years to really adapt them to our specific environment and to bring out the traits that we want to see. Some of the things that we focused on, for example, are the stress of the animals. So we have cultivated a herd of animals that are really not prone to stress out easily, and that just makes it that makes it better for everyone. It makes it better for the animals, makes it better for the quality of the meat. That's just one example. There's really, really in-depth amount of details we can go into genetics, but it all starts there. And then the cow-calf is basically the cow being impregnated. That's a 9-month gestation period, and then you have one calf typically. There can be twins, but it's uncommon, and it's actually not encouraged for a couple reasons. But basically one calf, and the calves are typically born in spring, and then they're weaned in the fall. That goes on to stage 3, which is backgrounding. The calves, they become independent, so they're weaned off of mother's milk, and they start eating a full grass diet.
Kent, excuse me, if we need to kind of move on here, people can see the slide there and obviously get a feeling for all the different stages.
Got it.
And if someone really wants to ask a question later, then maybe you can come back to it. But I would like to let Margot kind of take the floor now and tell us about Common Market. Thank you, Kent.
Sounds good.
Margot?
Thanks so much, Robert. And Kent, it's always great seeing you again. As Kent mentioned, and Robert mentioned, my name is Margot Robertson. I'm the Farm to School Specialist for the Common Market Texas. The Common Market is introducing itself in this particular conversation through the lens of the wholesaler or the middle person between the actual producer to the school or the end entity that would be receiving the food. What makes Common Market Texas a bit different from a traditional role of a producer is that we are a nonprofit with a dual-sided mission that allows us to focus on providing a stable and upward financial trajectory for local farmers and people in agriculture, including protein producers here in Southeast Texas, to institutions and anchor parts of the food industry on the receiving end, such as, excuse the thunder, guys, it's Houston, such as hospitals and public schools and private schools, healthcare organizations and clinics, basically anybody who would like to order really great quality food. The Common Market is able to coalition a network of 35 some odd producers of various products here in Southeast Texas and provide a link directly to schools, for example. And we had the opportunity to do that exact role with Augustus Ranch and Austin ISD. As Kent mentioned, we were able to initiate, unfortunately, we haven't been able to fully see through because of COVID, the entirety of the contract, but we won a public bid that the Austin School District put out for grass-fed ground beef. And one of the really remarkable things about this is that the way the bid was constructed, it allowed the Austin Independent School District not to prioritize price over other facets of value, which allowed us to provide a very high quality product from Augustus Ranch directly to the cafeterias of the schools. And as Ken said, in 6 months, it was just 75,000 pounds that was able to be produced locally, transported locally, and brought to the Austin School District here in Southeast Texas, well, Central Texas rather. So it's a very, it's a really great way of feeling very secure about what local procurement can look like on a larger scale. Austin Independent School District utilized this ground beef in their cafeterias, highlighting it on their menus, actually going through and providing information to parents in the community, because this was something that was created out of an ask from the community. Parents were polled in the Austin School District on what they wanted to see change, and a big part of that was high quality lunches and breakfasts that would be available for every student. And when this need was presented, Austin was able to craft a bid that allowed us to connect Augustus Ranch as the wholesaler and the mode of facilitating logistics for the ranch itself.
Okay, thank you, Margot. You know, I want to get back to you for a minute, Kent. I know you're the marketing manager for y'all's operation. I'm curious, how did the owners react to you when you took them the idea that you said, okay, I think we want to start selling our really high quality grass raised, pasture raised beef to a school district? How did that conversation come about? How did it go?
It was, it really happened pretty easily, pretty seamlessly, working with the Common Market. They were able to really step in and take care of all of the communications with the school district, which was very helpful. And on our end, working with the owners of the ranch, I mean, they were thrilled. There's obviously a lot of potential there to, you know, anytime we can put our product into the hands of people locally, especially for a cause like feeding the students. I had heard they were feeding 80,000 meals per day, you know, amongst the entire school district, and that's just, you know, the thought that we could start to help facilitate that and provide a better product everyone was really thrilled about it. There were some logistical challenges at the very beginning, and we were able to mobilize pretty quickly. It came about pretty quickly. We didn't have, you know, a huge amount of lead time. That's one thing I can talk about if we get to that, just kind of what the ideal scenario would be for a producer like us. But they were thrilled, and we mobilized to make it happen, and we definitely had to jump through some hoops and do some shuffling in terms of freezer storage and finding some offsite freezer storage, working with the common market to figure out a delivery schedule. But everyone was thrilled, and we'd love it if we could be a part of that again.
Yeah, Margot, you started off your conversation with saying, common market is kind of in the middle, and Kent just alluded to the fact that you essentially played that middle role in the communication chain here. I'm curious, how did you see kind of going from one conversation to the other, trying to represent the interests of both parties to the other party? How do you do that?
Well, Robert, I hope I do it well, because that's literally my job, is farm to school. So I hope I do my job well enough to communicate the messages. But that's what's really great about working with a wholesaler. In addition to opening doors to vendors that may not be accessible to one singular independent farm, a wholesaler or a food hub or a mission-driven food like accessibility site, especially to local, provide someone to do things like look up bids, submit for bids, understanding the language behind what it would take to show the added value, understanding what the requirements for insurance are. For example, a lot of school districts have an insurance minimum requirement in order to work with any farmer vendor. We are also the ones that help work. I am the person, for example, at the Common Market Texas, who works directly with the child nutrition directors as well as the nutritionists in order to develop the proper language, make sure that our farmers and our ranchers' stories are told properly, because it is very valuable to communicate that with transparency. We're also the ones that handle source identification. So in that particular case, we really do our best to let our farmers and producers and ranchers do what they love to do, which is concentrate on making this great food happen. And we handle that intermediary portion that does require a good amount of detail-oriented attention, especially when dealing with finance departments of school districts, in addition to the media department, in addition to, the nutrition department. That's what really, for me, is a really cool aspect of what the Common Market does in particular, because we are so focused on local. Having a partner like that of the caliber of Augustus Ranch has been a really great way to show school districts like how easy it can be through this chain of connectivity and collaboration to source directly from really great places right around the corner from them.
Thank you, Margot. I just want to mention that I see some questions coming up in the chat box, so please y'all keep putting them in there. And Kent, thank you for answering the question from Kelly. And so what you were just referring to, Margot, relates to kind of one of the facilitated questions we wanted to ask y'all is, what are the barriers that each of y'all see to getting into this farm to school business? And all of those things that you just mentioned, it seems to me that you're saying that Common Market sees it as your role to actually get over those barriers, insurance issues, all of that kind of stuff. And so what other barrier that maybe you didn't mention in that conversation is really important to Common Market as it tries to onboard producers, that you feel like that it's up to Common Market to try to handle, so to speak?
Well, one of the things that we really do focus on at the Common Market is transparency with source identification, really understanding and being sensitive to what our sourcing radius looks like, what our seasonality opportunities look like with school districts lining up with their, for example, having a school district that has a very hardline bid language that would kind of exclude products from Texas because of the items they're looking for is one of those things that you don't anticipate as a producer entering into, trying to enter into the school food realm. On the flip side, schools are not farmers. Like nutrition departments, child nutrition directors, they are not agriculturalists necessarily by trade. So they do not necessarily have the understanding of having a direct line of communication to local producers of any kind. So when you have entities like the Common Market who can bridge that gap of communication, it kind of troubleshoots those problems that are unexpected on both sides. But even more so to that, we talked about the opportunity for smaller farms who don't necessarily have insurance coverage that would be adequate to work with a wholesaler, but also logistics. When you have, we have refrigerated box trucks that go to these farms or to meeting points that we set up, and we bring that back to our facility in Houston, and everything is temperature checked, quality control, food safety is in place, and that's sent out. We also have, for example, a HACCP plan, which is something that many small producers may not have, and that is very much to deal with food safety requirements for a lot of school districts. Having an intermediary who has knowledge of that already set up, understanding how even food service management systems would be set up, that's a really good opportunity for producers trying to get a foothold in the door to enter into this realm. Before you even consider throwing a bid out, there's 5 steps before you could even qualify to submit. And so we really try and help bridge that gap and make those opportunities accessible.
Thank you. Kent, do you have any comments about what Margot just said?
No, that was great, and the Common Market did such a great job of kind of making it all happen in a really quick time frame. I guess one thing I'd like to add is in the future, I don't know from the Common Market's end what they had to go through and what exactly the communications looks like with the school district. I understand, I'm sure it's not an easy process, especially with dealing with the school districts and having all of these processes that they need to go through. For us, we're coming from a traditional mindset and timeline. And oftentimes with these things, they need to be executed in modern, I guess what I'm trying to say is the biggest challenge I see, and why it's so crucial to have folks like the Common Market and have those intermediary folks who understand the unique challenges of working with the school district and facilitating that, is going to be key, because we need, in an ideal world, we need a year's notice. Like we would be finding out this fall, like, yes, there's a contract signed, and we're going to be preparing to provide for the school district the following year. And oftentimes that's not realistic, not because of the Common Market, but probably because of the school. They just may not be able to mobilize the funds needed or the approval or what have you that far in advance to be able to work with local producers. So that's really one of the biggest things I wanted to also just add is in an ideal world for us, for producers, smaller producers, it's crucial that we have that time frame. And oftentimes I can see that being really challenging in the future. So having someone like Common Market being able to bridge the communication between the school district and the producers is essential. So.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to pose a question to each of you, and Ken, I'll ask you to answer it first. Just in relation to these folks who are watching you right now, thinking about, okay, well, they're kind of thinking in their mind, I want to do a panel for a training that's coming up. What are the 3 issues that the trainers should focus on when training producers about selling to school? What are the top 3 in your mind, right off the top of your mind? Is how to figure out pricing one? I know I'm kind of catching you off guard, but what are the top 3 issues that we really need to make sure that producers are exposed to, or that gets talked about at these panels when we start doing our producer trainings?
Well, so when you say producer trainings, I'm assuming there'd be folks who are speaking directly with producers and farms. Is that right?
That's correct. So each of the folks here that are at this training will eventually be doing trainings in their states for producers. And we want to make sure that those trainings are answering the questions that the producers have on their minds. And so you saw the woman from NYU earlier, or maybe you didn't, probably can't, but she talked about some of the issues that came to mind as they did a national survey and just did some focus groups on farmers of how do we do this? How do we make this work? And so I'm curious, if you were to go to a training what would you want to know? What would you want to have answered when you left a training from your perspective as a protein provider? You know, it probably might be different for a fresh produce producer, but for you as a ground beef or just protein, what do you really need to know? What did you need to know before you could get the blessing of the owners of your operation to really do this?
Sure. The two biggest variables just right out of the gate are going to be volume and pricing. So understanding a realistic ballpark of the amount of product that you know they're going to reliably be able to take over what period of time. You know, if it's vague, meaning, well, we'd love to be able to do this, but then it ends up being something different. Oftentimes producers, especially small producers that are, you know, cash strapped or just for other reasons, you know, that could be a nail in the coffin, basically. A lot of times for producers, our relationships with our local processors, with our meat processors, is just as important as if we can actually produce what we're going to sell to the school district. So, you know, understanding the volume, a realistic volume, understanding the price, what the potential is for you know, the product. And in the case with Common Market, they were really great. They really came to me and said, hey, like, you know, we want to bid this project, and, you know, we would love to do this. Like, realistically, what does this look like for you? And they were able to give me the volume estimations up front, which was great. And so I did all the work. I did all the work of talking to our processor. I did the work of like looking at all of the different animals we would have to supply for that contract, on the schedule, storage, all the different costs. And I gave them a number that was realistic for us to be able to actually do that. And I, you know, to be fair, I think that I thought it probably wasn't going to work out, just because I assumed the school district's budget was tiny. You know, I have no idea how they get their money, how they spend it, what they allocate. But I did it in an honest, straightforward way, and it was based on the real costs. But it was because they were able to give me like very specific targets that we were able to make that happen. So it has to be very, ideally, it has to be a really specific target in terms of volume. And then having the processing relationship in place to be able to do that. You know, some processing facilities are booked up to a year in advance. If you don't already have that ongoing relationship, there's no way you're going to be able to do this. Now I'm talking on a large scale. Obviously 75,000 pounds is a lot. You know, if we're talking small, like 500 pounds per month, you know, there's a lot more wiggle room there. But having those specific targets up front and being able to stand behind those is everything. At least as a producer, that's what I'd want to know up front.
Okay, there's a question in the chat room from Kelly again. She's asking, I guess, a real current question. Are you also experiencing a backlog in processing appointments right now? I guess she's asking right now.
We're fortunate that we've had a relationship with our processor for a long time leading up to COVID. Our processor was also in the process of expanding right as this actually happened. So it really happened at the perfect time. A lot of folks might not have that luxury if you don't already have that standing appointment. We had literally standing appointments with the processor every other week, booked for the entire year. And when we needed to turn up the volume on that, they were able to accommodate us because they had been growing and building their operation. So many producers are experiencing backlog. And yeah, now it's even more, you know, it can be a serious bottleneck, but we were very fortunate that we had that standing relationship.
Thank you, Ken. Margot, I have a quick question for you, and then I want you to see if you can also address that 3 top issues that trainers need to make sure they address when we actually start doing the producer trainings. But here's a quick question. How long has the Common Market been in Texas, and how long did it take to get up and running?
The Common Market Texas is actually a regional part of a national food collective which is the Common Market, which was started 13 years ago in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, very much focused on providing local food access to underserved and marginalized communities. And we've expanded to 3 different regions. Currently, we serve the Mid-Atlantic based, as I said, out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We also serve the Southeast out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we serve Texas out of Houston. So we are very, very fortunate not only to have our 3rd year, we're going well into our 3rd year here in Houston, and we are in our 13th year nationally. But even though we are the junior of the 3, we are looking at definite opportunities for expansion, especially into the Midwest in the United States. And we are going to be continuing to grow here in Houston, expanding. We have a 400-mile sourcing radius and an approximately measurably equal delivery radius. So our focus really is on Southeast Texas. But yeah, we're really fortunate to have a 13-year deep bench of experience to be able to pull from.
Okay,
and as far as the other question, Robert, as far as being able to address some of the things that as you know, you guys are the trainers, you're training trainers right now. Understanding how school food purchasing works is definitely something that producers should be made aware of. A lot of times you're going to be looking at net terms that are going to pay in 15, 30, or 45 day out. Understanding what bids actually look like. A lot of bids, as Kent mentioned, we were able to provide really specific information about what was going to be required over a prolonged timeline, because that's how a lot of the school food for local procurement, their bids are structured in that manner. Being able to communicate that ahead of time and the producers having an opportunity to crop forecast and really start figuring out what those logistics and volumes will look like for them is going to be really important. And then it's kind of hand in hand, pricing and volume. You know, when Austin ISD, before they switched to this particular endeavor with local procurement, they were using commodity beef. And that was a big switch from 4 times a year being delivered commodity beef to their freezers to once a month being delivered fresh local. Is a very big swing in logistics. That means that's a different push when it comes to a price point. And it's very intertwined and it's intermingled. That's why when you have an intermediary like the Common Market, we're able to handle a lot of that dialogue with the school and basically communicate to the farmers the points that they need to know. And so the producers really understanding that it's a nuanced conversation when it comes to school food procurement. Their payout times are going to be different. Their expectations are going to be very clearly laid out. And logistics are going to matter in that. And that's going to be reflected in what pricing looks like. And then, from the very last point of it, certifications, knowing that, there's going to be requirements that you're going to have to pull up. Food safety plans, if you have, for example, we have a recall protocol, using an intermediary, and really, helping producers learn if this is something they want to get a foot in the door in, discovering what the best route is. Some producers are already in a space where they can handle independently engaging in school districts, and that is wonderful because they have all of these details lined up. And some producers don't even know the checklist beforehand of what they would even need to begin the conversation. So I think if they were able to pull out what that checklist would look like for them, it would be considered a good training.
Thank you, Marta. I'm curious, Kent, do you have any current dialogues going on right now with other school districts that you're trying to figure out how to make it work?
No, we don't. Don't worry, Margot. No. No, we don't. We've actually taken a step back from wholesale for the remainder of the year, with a couple exceptions. But we've had a couple schools in the past reach out to us, but it was always just, essentially they couldn't afford to pay much over commodity pricing. And because of our cost to actually process those cattle, all the work, the time, the money, energy that goes into that, we just can't, we can't compete on that level. That's one of the biggest things. We're just, different it's almost like different industries, you know, when it comes to the commodity versus more of a local ranch raised product. So no, but we have had interest. We have had people reach out, but never on the scale that we have worked with the through the AISD and the common market.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask you the same question, Margot. Do you have any current negotiations going on with other school districts, not only just for meat products, but for fresh produce also?
Yes, obviously I can only give some kind of a little bit of high altitude answer to that because it's still bid answer season. And as we all know, it's a very delicate process when you are entering into a closed bid. Anything above a micro purchasing limit in our state, you know, we need to be very delicate, but we are very pleased to announce that we will be having some brand new partnerships for produce with 2 different school districts this year, in continuation with our existing partnerships with several other smaller districts here in Texas, on the southeast and in and around the greater Houston area. We also have some Central Texas schools that will be coming on board because of you know, relationships that we're able to develop with food service management companies. And so, yes, long answer, yes. Short answer, I wish I could tell you more, but I guess you'll just have to keep an ear to the ground. But we are really, really pleased with what we're going to be able to do. And that's what's really cool about being in this position. Kent, you know, really hit the nail on the head that, you know, commodity pricing is very difficult for a small scale producer to even begin to compete with. However, when schools districts like Austin put out a very dedicated, locally focused procurement bid, they're able to do some really cool things, finding sourcing that's really going to support that from a financial aspect. Grants, any type of funding that would support farm to school procurement is also a big part of that for those independent districts. But yeah, we have some really cool relationships that are on the horizon.
Thank you, Margot. Well, we got about 5 minutes left, y'all. I'm just curious, does anybody want to take the floor and ask a direct question to either of these folks here? I know we've had some in the chat box, but here's the opportunity just to blurt one out if you'd like to. It's a great opportunity to have these 2 folks here. If not, Kent, I'll just ask you, what would you like to sum up this talk with? What's the last words of wisdom you'd like to leave this crowd as we go about trying to figure out the best ways to, you know, help producers make it work for them? That's the ultimate goal here, is how do we make it work for them, right? For you, for folks like you.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is really just the continuation of the education and in collaboration along the supply chain. You know, I mentioned in an ideal world, I'm finding out, you know, August, September of 2021, if we need to supply, you know, 100,000 pounds of ground beef in fall of 2022. I need that lead time. I need that lead time to book appointments. I need that lead time to make sure that there's enough partner ranches if we need to actually build a co-op to bring in, you know, other producers locally. Where we live in Yoakum, near Gonzales County, it's one of the biggest cow-calf producing regions in the country. And the majority of these animals are coming from small independent farms, but they're going into the conventional industrial system where they're sold at sale barns, and then they, you know, either end up in a feedlot or they're trucked all over the country. We have to be able to intercept that upstream and start to facilitate these longer term relationships. And the more upstream we can plan and mobilize funds to be able to do that, especially for the producers who oftentimes they don't have the cash reserves to be able to, you know, on a dime, you know, provide a ton of product really quickly. You know, it takes time. It really does take time. And we're dealing with nature here. So the industrial food system can respond to those things in a really quick way, right? Because they're dealing in volumes that are just so enormous. 100,000 pounds of ground beef is nothing to them. You know, I know it's just, we just need to build out the supply chain as far upstream as possible and figure out a way to mobilize the funds Common Market was very kind and were able to give us, you know, a little bit of a cash advance up front, and we probably wouldn't have been able to pull this contract off had they not done that. So that's a great start. I hope that just the education and the communication about this can lead to something like that. So the last thing I'll say is, you may have seen it, the USDA just announced that they're going to be providing $500 million in funding to support the building of small local meat processing facilities. Don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but they realize that we need to level the playing field for some of these smaller producers, and meat processing is an enormous bottleneck. You know, 80% of the meat supply in the country is controlled by four companies. And so $500 million going towards local meat processing facilities is probably going to do a lot of good. And so that'll start hopefully sometime here in early 2022. And that will hopefully kind of relieve some of the bottlenecks that we might have for small producers to be able to work with folks like Common Market to supply school districts. So
Thank you. Margot, I have one last question that I asked you to kind of work into your last answer here. Is it says, how many years have you been building these relationships in Texas?
I am in my 5th year in totality as far as food systems advocacy goes, specifically with Farm to School. I'm in my 3rd year in this role with the Common Market Texas, but I also work with healthcare institutions, colleges, including St. Edward's, who also gets great ground beef from Augustus Ranch. In basically anybody who likes food, tell them to call me.
All right, well, thank you, Margot. Looks like we've kind of gone over a little bit. Sorry about that, folks. I know it's a conversation I would really like to keep going, but we'll turn it back over to you, Tammy, I guess. And thank you, Margot. Thank you, Kent.
Yeah, thank you for the insight about into working with schools in Central Texas. And actually, we are going to turn it over to Tomas, who's going to set us up for, I believe he's setting us up for our next section. We can offer a quick bio break too. Actually, Jenny Lee's going next. So why don't we take just 5 minutes, returning at 2:50 for a quick bio break, and we'll meet you back at 3:50. Sorry, I keep forgetting I'm in Montana or Mountain Time Zone. So yes, 3:55.
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are in the home stretch here for today. And I don't think I have introduced myself to the whole group yet. So my name is Jenny Lee Harris, and I'm with National Farm to School Network. And I'm going to just give us a little brief introduction into what we're calling the Trainer Action Plan before we have our second and last breakout sort of time together today to wrap us up. So the Trainer Action Plan, this is, you'll find it in the folder that you received in the mail as a standalone document here. It's also, as you can see at the top, it's part of Appendix G in your facilitator guide. So you can also access that in your physical facilitator guide as well as online if you prefer to access it that way. And then we have this additional printed copy for you in your folder. And we really did that just so that you had this easy pulled out piece of paper to jot notes down in as you go along this week, and then also, of course, have that copy in the facilitator guide as you're continuing to plan your training, your producer training. So just a little bit of an overview about this document before we look at it more closely. We developed this action plan for trainers to really help pull in as many of those big picture components of planning into one place. Hopefully you'll be spending a lot of time with this resource and find it useful throughout this workshop, as well as in your, particularly in your state breakout teams throughout the week. And so the purposes of this trainer action plan are really twofold. One is to model the producer action planning that's sort of embedded in the producer workbook that you're hopefully including in the producer trainings that you're hosting. And as Tammy mentioned earlier, I'm going to dig into that more tomorrow and throughout the week so that you're really seeing what that action planning component looks like for producers. So we wanted to have a trainer action plan that sort of modeled that approach for trainers. And the second piece is really to assist you with assessing your teams, your state groups, strengths and gaps and sort of what's needed in your state in terms of hosting these producer trainings and really allow sort of all of those distilled next steps and action items to be placed in one resource moving forward. So I'm just going to go over the structure of the trainer action plan and how it functions alongside some of the other resources. So you'll see the first part of the trainer action plan, which is on this page 139 in the facilitator guide or in the standalone sheet of paper that came in your folder. You'll see the first part of it is a checklist of items that start on page 139 and go on to page 140. And so this checklist is organized into 6 buckets that you'll see. So know the content, build your training team, make it local, plan your agenda, and identify and reach your audience, and then plan for action. So those are the 6 buckets in which these sort of checklist items are organized into. And we put them in that order in a somewhat linear fashion, but you may not follow that checklist linearly, and that's okay, depending on where you're at. And this assessment, like I said, is really intended to support you in your state teams in assessing sort of, where the knowledge skills are, where the gaps may be, and sort of who you might need to pull into your team to make sure that you are meeting all of these content pieces for the producer training. And so throughout this week, we'll be going through these buckets in our breakout teams and doing some of that thinking and assessing together. And then after the checklist, so you'll see on the next slide, the second part of this resource includes the action plan table. And this is where teams are really encouraged to insert those necessary action items, those timelines, any additional resources or tools that you might need, additional contacts that you want to reach out to really help plan and host a local producer training in your state. So the filled out action plan is really intended to support you in conjunction with the planning and outreach guide. And Tammy already mentioned, went over a little bit about the planning and outreach guide. We're going to dig into more of that later this week. But those 2 pieces will really be your blueprint for planning and preparing your training and how you want to include or incorporate these materials into producer facing trainings that you're doing in your state. So you're going to be generating a lot of content that can go into this action plan during this week. And you'll also see screenshots of the table like this in your Jamboard. So if you haven't yet clicked through to see the other Jamboard slides, you'll see, like I said, these sort of screenshots of this table virtually on the Jamboards as well. And so having these multiple formats in this setting is really just to support you in whatever way that your team wants to brainstorm, whether that's virtually on the Jamboards, whether that's writing it down on this piece of paper or some combination of both. Those resources are there for you as you're planning together as a team. So we'll walk through a quick example just to see. I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward, but it's helpful to kind of see what we're envisioning here. So for this first bucket, the know your content area, you want to start with those assessment statements and then move on to the action plan table. That's how it's intended to work. So we can pretend, right, that in this example, there's a state team who's gone through the checklist and they've checked off these statements. So they feel that the members in their team, have broad knowledge and expertise spanning both trial nutrition programs as well as working with producers, which is great. But at this point, the team is less familiar and at the beginning stages of understanding sort of how to access and navigate all the resources found in this trainer's toolkit to supplement their content knowledge and to support their training planning efforts. So this might be where a lot of teams are, a lot of states are right now, and that is perfectly okay. So in this case, you're moving to the action plan table with that assessment in mind. And so folks, based on that assessment and the example we saw, would then, you can see on the next slide, see what types of action steps and timelines they might place into the action planning table. And so again, most of these action steps are pretty straightforward, right? Like the group will take some time early on to dig into the resources and the module content. And really our goal with this workshop, right, is to work through those pieces together and make sure that each state leaves this week with a solid understanding of what the materials are, how they work together, how to access them, and of course, how to use them with producers. And just again, to note that the Planning and Outreach Guide is an excellent tool to review in tandem with the Trainer Action Plan because it includes detailed checklists for planning and preparing your producer training that really align with this action plan table. And they provide a lot of action steps that you'll want to pull from and want to include in this table. All right. So as both Lacey and I mentioned earlier, to facilitate group brainstorming and support action plan develop in a virtual setting, we'll also be using Jamboard. And so folks have already started to get familiar with that platform if you haven't been already. And as you've seen, each breakout group has their own set of boards, and those boards, again, are aligned not only with the workshop agenda, but with this trainer action plan. So you're going to see a lot of visual similarities there. So I'll just pause before we transition into our second breakout for the day and see if there are any questions, just initial questions about the trainer action plan before we jump into our teams. Great. Well, I just want to emphasize that, this is a tool that we want to be useful for folks as they're planning. It's not an expectation that you have to have this filled out and show it to us or anything. So feel free to use it as it feels useful. And again, feel free to jump between the Jamboard, the trainer action plan, however your state needs to. So on the next slide, just to kind of get us prepared for our last session or our last breakout team today, we're going to be building off sort of those earlier conversations about goals and roles that you all as a team and as individuals are coming into this week with, and looking at how can we build those partnerships. What does it look like to build a training team? And so that bucket again is identified in the trainer action plan. You can see it as the second set of assessment questions on page 139, and it's also at the top of page 141 in the action plan table. And we also have a Jamboard, which you can see here on this slide, that's going to facilitate sort of thinking through that assessment and those questions. So we will be whisked away by Carlos very soon into that last breakout group. And can someone time check me on how much time we're going to spend together?
I believe it's 15 minutes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, 15 minutes. So yeah, I think we're ready to go if there aren't any burning questions. And as always, the facilitators in the groups will be able to support you through the conversation today.
All right.
Welcome back, folks. Looks like everyone is back in the main room. I hope that last breakout session was productive and you got to all cover some more ground. Yeah, so we're at the close of the day right now, and just wanted to touch on and really get a sense of from you all if some of the goals that we had outlined for the day have been met. So I'm going to ask 3 questions, and hoping if you guys are able to, you can respond with a thumbs up or a yes in the chat, or any kind of just you know, indication that the goal was met for you today. So first question, having a better understanding of the Bringing the Farm to School project and materials. Excellent. A variety of thumbs, yeah, that's good. All right, have seen a panel in action and understand the purpose of a panel in a local producer training. Great, wonderful. And then lastly, have met new people from your region or have gotten to know old friends better. Cool, wonderful. All right, I have one more question for you all, and I think it'd be best if I just go state by state for this question. If someone from your state team or group wants to share just a bit more about you know, what your time was like today, that'd be great. But just wanted to know, the question is who or what group that is not in attendance today should be at the table and on your state team moving forward. So I'm gonna just go down the list of states that we got, and we'll start with Texas.
Hello, this is Emily Case from Texas. We are really excited to expand our training team list. We have a couple of regional training.
Hey, this is Reagan White-Salusi. I missed a call from this number.
You can go ahead, Emily.
Oh, okay. Including our education service centers and our AgriLife extension agents. And there's quite a few support organizations within our state that we think could help us at this table.
Great. Good to know. Good to know. All right, Arizona.
We focused a lot of our conversation around kind of where the partners that are here are, kind of where their expertise lie, but we also were in discussion about kind of the gaps that came out around, for us, it was module 3 and module 4, and recognizing that we need more expertise, definitely heavily on the producer end of understanding, like we have a lot of emphasis on kind of school procurement, but in turn, we're still pretty green in terms of our navigation of regulations around producers. And so I thought it was really valuable to see that gap and kind of initiate that conversation of who else we can pull to the table. We didn't necessarily identify a ton of partners yet, but looking forward to continuing that conversation.
Great, thank you. All right, how about Utah?
I think similarly to what some others have said is that we need some more of that agricultural producer expertise.
Thank you.
Okay, we should be done.
How about Arkansas and Oklahoma?
Sure, I can jump in. I'm Sarah Lane. I work at the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. So we have a lot of people on from our department, but we did identify that it would be great to pull in some of our partners from the Arkansas Department of Education, the Child Nutrition Unit, since they operate the National School Lunch Program and other feeding programs. Some other partners we thought about were a couple universities that work specifically with certain groups of farmers, and just some other farm support organizations that lead training.
Thank you. And lastly, Louisiana.
Hi, everyone. This is Crystal Bessie with the Louisiana Farm to School program. And we also had a lot of people on with our own organization. And so we did a lot of reflecting on that. And I'd say, you know, as far as agricultural partnerships go, I think it would be good for us to identify and increase our partnerships in that area.
Thank you, Crystal. And I just realized I didn't give an opportunity for Oklahoma to chime in. So anyone from Oklahoma would like to chair?
I was just getting ready to ask you, Tomas. Well, I've learned a lot from today. I've learned to brainstorm a little bit more about who I actually work with. And I think bringing to the table to do this kind of training is going to involve my whole entire marketing team, because we all work with producers. And we also, my Ag in the Classroom gals work real closely with adult education as well as myself. And so, and then including my outstanding champion child nutrition directors that are already doing Farm to School in a marvelous way. And so those are a few, but then like everybody else, I mean, I've brainstormed. Margot had us all brainstorming really good. So I brainstormed several folks that I can add to my team.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, and you know, we wanted to ask this question not as a means of discouraging you or making you all realize that there's not people here that should be here, but really just to walk away from this training with a plan on reaching out to folks that would be, you know, best suited for a state team to bring Farm to School to your region. So that's why we asked the question. And yeah, we will be there to support you all in getting networked with those groups following this training. Yeah, so that's the end of day one. Tomorrow we'll be digging into the first half of the producer curriculum content, which will include the introduction and modules 1 and 2. We'll also be spending more time in our state breakout groups to work on specifically action planning. So there's going to be a lot in store for tomorrow, and of course we have a lot more ground to cover this week. But you know, again, we wanted to thank you all for being here with us and agreeing to work on this really important practice of bringing Farm to School to your states. All right, well, thank you so much for one successful day, and I'll see you all tomorrow.